welcome back to the channel. Part 2, the motherboard swap. Here in the Oompa Loompa Rig. Had a CPU debug light. So far we have tried to reset the BIOS. That did not work. We've inspected the motherboard, not really sure what the issue is. So in order to test to see if it's an actual motherboard issue or a CPU issue, I'm going to attempt to test that out with swapping the motherboard. So the theory is if I swap the motherboard out and I have the same CPU debug issue, then it's the CPU or something else. And at this point, I'm hoping it's not. I don't know what it is. I'm hoping it's not the CPU. This is one of my more expensive CPUs. Not one of the more expensive CPUs on the market, but just one of the more expensive CPUs that I have in a mining rig. I think this is the Ryzen 7 2700X. Does pretty well on some CPU mining. I mean, it's not super profitable, but CPU mining, it's hard to be profitable with CPU mining, unless you get the Threadrippers and real high-end CPUs. So now that I have the motherboard in, it's time to detach the heatsink and CPU cooler from the other one, and then we're gonna clean it up, then we're gonna swap it out. So I could, if I actually had another CPU that I could swap in, I could just have tried swapping the CPU. However, I didn't have another CPU at the time. It wasn't until a couple weeks to get the other CPU. So this is the best way to test it that I have right now. These upgraded Ryzen heatsink and coolers are a little tricky at first. I don't have a whole lot of experience messing with these newer ones. The latch is actually a little bit more, has a little more give than the other ones. A little bit different design. So do want to be careful when getting this off, but this one, because it was in the mining rig, getting pretty toasty in there, it was a little baked on. Alright, so let's actually just inspect the CPU a little bit more while we're here. Get this thing cleaned up. Let's have a closer look at it. See if we can't figure out what our issue is here. With as kind of baked on as the CPU cooler was, It's making me think there's something wrong with the CPU. I really hope I'm really hoping it's not. I'm really hoping it's not the CPU. I'd rather replace the motherboard than the CPU, as far as like total cost. Motherboard was maybe a little less than $100 when I bought it. The CPU was a lot more expensive. I don't want to say a lot more expensive. I mean, maybe another 60 to $100 more expensive, but just total cost, I'd rather the motherboard be broken if I have to replace something than the actual CPU. So I'm hoping it's something more internal with the motherboard, maybe something internal with the chipset under the motherboard. I don't know. So we're gonna get this cleaned up and pop it out, have a closer look at it. If everything looks all good, then we're gonna throw it in the other one and test it. And to clean this up, I am just using isopropyl alcohol. And I would probably recommend using gloves, because this heat sink, the graphite stuff, this goo, it gets on everything. So if you get it on your hands, clean it off, or you will spread it to everything else you touch. So this, because I do have a chance and have this completely apart, I do take a chance to clean this, clean off the CPU fan, cooler. Let's see. This looks good. I don't see anything that looks to be off with the CPU pins here. Nothing. It smells fine. It doesn't smell burnt. A lot of times, if something's burnt or been burnt, you can smell something in it. It'll have a burnt smell. This smells just like an electronic, I guess. Pins look fine. Everything looks good. Yeah, everything looks good. I don't know what. Maybe it's something to do with the internal part of the motherboard. I don't know. If you ever do clean a CPU and you have some stuff on the bottom side there, be sure to clean that nice and gentle. You do not want to hit those pins because they are very sensitive, and once it's bent, it's bent. And I don't have all the tools to rebend a bent pen. And drop it in there, lock it in place, give it a little test pull. Everything's tight, it's not moving, it's not coming out. Alright, good to go. Let's add a little heatsink compound. I already know some of you guys are gonna jump on me in the comments down there and say that's too much. I'll tell you what, I haven't had much of any issues. I guess up until now. This is the first issue I've had, really. Dropped in place here. Kind of the tab. Let's get this one lined up. That is the most annoying part about swapping out a motherboard, is really all the wiring to wire it back up. Go ahead and put our RAM back in. Now, one thing that I would recommend, and you might be asking yourself, why did I have two of these motherboards? Well, the reason I had two of these motherboards is because when you're building mining rigs, or really anything, it's a lot easier to get comfortable with using the same kind of equipment over and over and over. It's same thing, I guess, with the 3D printing that I do. I like to have the same 3D printer. It's just easy to learn, and once you've learned it, then you don't have to spend a lot of time learning new stuff about it. Where if you have multiple models, you have to educate yourself on several different models, how to upgrade the firmware on several different models. Every different manufacturer has a different way to update the BIOS, it seems like. And their process to update the actual firmware of the BIOS just is different. So having the same process to get everything set up just makes it a little bit simpler. All the plugs are in the same place, especially building multiple rigs just makes it easier. I am going to look at the owner's manual to get the front panel connection all wired up with the front panel LED light, the power switch, all that good stuff at the front panel, as well as the little speaker, or beeper rather. Like I said, this is probably the most annoying part of setting up computers, in my opinion, is the wiring and cable management. It's the most time consuming because you want it to be neat, you want it to be clean. Or at least I do. I like that. I like it to look nice and neat inside once I pop open the top here. Sometimes you're forced to kind of leave it a little messy. Sometimes just depending on the wires and where they are, where they gotta go type deal. So sometimes there's no way around leaving one or two messy wires type deal, but for the most part I like to have everything kind of cleaned up and tidy. Now, most of these cables, probably are really unneeded, to be honest. So, I mean, I'm hooking up the USB ports on the front panel of the server box. Then I'm hooking up the lights, the LED lights. The only thing that really is needed is the power switch, and maybe the reset switch. Everything else is probably a little overkill, but I want the lights on the front of it to light up when it's on. You know, I don't know. It's just me. And then there is also a buzzer. Now, I did have to, from the actual server case, did have to change some of the pin configurations that came on the plugs. I want to say the power switch actually has a 3-pin, and it's probably more fitted for maybe some older or different configurations, I guess, where you can move those pins around within that 3-pin setup. There is only 2 pins, just like the normal power switch, but it just goes to a 3-pin type connector. So I did have to move some of the pins around to make that 3-pin fit in the 2-pin, because where that power switch goes, that connector goes on my motherboard, there's space to the left of the actual pins. So that extra empty space is able to just hang over nothing, and it doesn't interfere with anything, so it worked out just fine. Hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you were able to follow what I mean by that. But so now that we have everything all wired up, got our front panel all hooked up, our CPU's in, fan connectors are all done. Now let's go hook this up and see what we get. Alright, so test a couple theories out here. I read on Reddit that you can get a display from a graphics card while on a riser plugged in. We're gonna see. I don't know. We're gonna find out if that works. Second thing here, we swapped out the motherboard, so we're gonna see if it was the CPU or if it was the motherboard. So we're gonna find out if it gets past that CPU debug light. Alright, let's plug this in and see what happens here. It's not right. Well, it's just me. It's just me. I was trying to plug it in upside down. Alright. So, well, first of all, let me unplug my flash drive. Alright. So we got power. Get the CPU. Damn. The Ryzen 7 is dead.